single dad rents a room to a crying homeless girl, not knowing she's a millionaire CEO's daughter. "You are nothing but a failure, and you are dragging my granddaughter down with you." The wind howled outside, a mournful, hollow sound that seemed to seep through the very walls of the small, worn house, carrying with it the biting cold of a relentless November evening. Liam sat at the kitchen table, the wood beneath his elbows smooth and familiar, polished by years of meals and homework and the quiet desperation of a life lived on the edge. The single lamp above him cast a flickering, golden glow on a stack of envelopes, each one a stark white reminder of his precarious existence, their windows revealing bold, unforgiving red letters. He was a good man, a quiet man, but the world had a way of being loud and cruel to those who were quiet. His shoulders slumped under a weight that was more than just fatigue. It was the profound, soul-deep weariness of a man fighting a battle he knew he was losing, one day at a time. The house was too silent, a sterile silence that had settled in after his wife, Clara, had been taken by an illness that had stolen her light and shattered their world, leaving behind a mountain of debt and a sacred, unspoken grief that echoed in every corner. He was alone. He ran a trembling hand through his hair, his gaze drifting to the living room where his daughter, 6-year-old Lily, slept soundly on the threadbare sofa, a tattered picture book resting on her small chest. Her face, so innocent and pale in the dim light, was a perfect blend of his own and Clara's, a constant, beautiful ache in the center of his heart. She was the reason he kept going, the single, unwavering light in his deepening shadows. For her, he would endure the gnawing hunger, the sleepless nights, the quiet dignity of pretending everything was fine when it was splintering apart. He had been unjustly fired from the warehouse weeks ago, a casualty of a cold corporate reshuffling that cared little for the lives it upended. Now, their savings had vanished, evaporated like morning fog, and the final notice from the bank felt like a physical blow. He had one last, desperate idea, a solution that made his chest tighten with a fresh wave of fear. He had to rent out Clara's old art studio, the small, sunlit room at the back of the house that he had kept as a sanctuary, a last piece of her. The thought of a stranger in their home, in her space, was unbearable. He was compromised. With a resolve born of pure necessity, he found a piece of cardboard and a thick black marker, his hand steady as he wrote the 4 simple words: "Room for rent." Each letter felt like a betrayal of Clara's memory, a concession to the harsh reality he could no longer shield Lily from. He taped the sign to the inside of the front window, the flimsy paper a fragile shield against the storm of their circumstances. He looked at his daughter again, her gentle breathing the only sound in the house besides the pounding rain. A profound love, raw and overwhelming, washed over him, momentarily drowning out the fear. He would do anything to protect her innocent world, even if it meant letting a piece of the cold, uncertain world in. He didn't know it yet, but this simple act of survival, this last-ditch effort to keep a roof over his daughter's head, would change everything. The universe was about to knock on his door. It was a test. The relentless hammering of the rain on the roof was a percussive backdrop to the evening, each drop a tiny fist beating against their fragile shelter. Liam was cleaning the few dishes from their meager dinner of soup and toast when a soft, hesitant knock echoed through the house, so quiet it was almost lost in the storm's fury. He froze, his heart thudding in his chest. No one ever came by this late, especially not in this weather. He dried his hands on a worn towel, his mind racing through possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. He peered through the peephole, his view distorted by the rain streaming down the glass, and saw a figure huddled on his doorstep, a silhouette made brittle and small by the lashing wind and rain. Taking a deep breath, he unlatched the deadbolt, the soft click of the mechanism sounding unnaturally loud in the tense silence. He opened the door. Standing before him was a young woman, no older than 20, soaked to the bone and trembling violently from the biting cold. Her clothes, a simple pair of jeans and a thin jacket, were tattered and clung to her fragile frame, and her face was pale, haunted by a desperate, shattering sadness. Her eyes, wide and glistening with unshed tears, were the color of a stormy sea, and they held a raw vulnerability that struck him to his core. She was clutching a small, worn backpack to her chest as if it were a life raft. Her lips parted, but only a small, choked sound came out before her voice cracked. She pointed a shaking finger toward the sign in his window. He saw her. "The room," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the gale. Is it still available?" He saw the last of her hope hanging on his answer. Liam's first instinct was to say no. Every protective fiber of his being screamed at him to close the door, to keep this unknown sorrow away from his daughter, away from the precarious peace of their home. But then he looked into her hollow eyes, and he didn't see a threat. He saw a reflection of his own desperation, the same silent plea for a safe harbor in a cruel world. He saw a child, lost and alone. It was an undeniable connection. "Please," she added, a single tear tracing a path down her rain-streaked cheek. "I don't have much, but I can pay something. I can't be out here tonight." The sincerity in her voice, the complete absence of guile, disarmed him. Just then, a small voice piped up from behind him. "Daddy? Is that a water angel?" Lily stood in the doorway to the living room, rubbing the sleep from her eyes, her small hand clutching a soft, well-loved teddy bear. She was looking at the drenched girl with wide, curious eyes, not with fear, but with innocent wonder. Lily took a hesitant step forward and held out her bear. "You can hold Barnaby," she offered in a soft hush. "He makes the cold go away." That small, selfless gesture shattered the last of Liam's hesitation. He couldn't teach his daughter about compassion and then turn this poor soul away. He couldn't honor Clara's memory by hardening his heart. It was a test he had to pass. He stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in," he said, his voice gentle. "Come in out of the storm," the girl gasped. A sharp, audible intake of breath, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. She looked from his face to Lily's, her own expression a mixture of profound relief and disbelief. She stepped inside, dripping a puddle of rainwater onto the worn welcome mat. Liam closed the door, shutting out the storm and sealing the moment. He fetched the warmest, thickest blanket he owned, one of Clara's old quilts, and wrapped it around her trembling shoulders. The warmth of the fabric seemed to startle her. She looked down at the colorful patches, her fingers tracing the stitching as if it were a sacred artifact. "I'll make you some tea," Liam said, turning toward the kitchen, his voice steady despite the seismic shift he felt in the room. He didn't know who she was or what troubles had led her to his doorstep on this stormy night. He only knew that in a world that had shown him so little kindness, he had to offer what little he had. It was the only way to keep his own light from going out. She was safe now. The young woman, who introduced herself only as Alara, sat huddled on the sofa, wrapped in the heavy quilt, clutching the warm mug of tea as if it were an anchor. She hadn't said much. Her responses to his gentle questions were quiet and vague, her eyes never quite meeting his, instead fixated on the dancing flames in the small, electric fireplace he'd turned on for her. Liam understood. He recognized the shell shock of someone whose world had splintered. He didn't push. He simply sat in the old armchair opposite her, the silence between them filled with the sound of the rain and Lily's soft breathing from the other room, where he had tucked her back into bed. He showed Alara the small room at the back of the house. It was sparse, containing only a single bed, a small wooden desk, and a window that looked out onto the rain-lashed garden. It was clean but filled with an unspoken emptiness. "It was my wife's," he said quietly, the words hanging in the air. She was an artist. Alara ran a hand over the wooden desk, her touch light and reverent. A profound sadness seemed to pass over her face. "It's beautiful," she whispered. That night, Liam lay awake for a long time, listening to the unfamiliar sound of another person breathing under his roof. The fear was still there, a low hum beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a strange sense of rightness. He had done what Clara would have done. He had chosen kindness over fear. The next morning, the house was filled with the smell of pancakes, a rare treat he was making for Lily. Alara emerged from her room looking slightly more human. She had washed her face, and though she was still pale and her eyes were shadowed, some of the raw desperation had receded. She watched as Lily, chattering excitedly, drizzled a comical amount of syrup onto her plate. A small, sad smile touched Alara's lips. It was the first time he'd seen her even remotely smile. She insisted on paying him, pulling a crumpled $20 bill from her pocket. It was clearly the last of her money. "It's all I have right now," she said, her voice laced with shame. "I'll get more." I promise. Liam wanted to refuse, but he saw the desperate need for dignity in her eyes. He took the note, a silent agreement passing between them. The days that followed fell into a strange, quiet rhythm. Alara was a ghost in their house. She spent most of her time in her room, and when she did emerge, she was silent and watchful. She was polite, always offering to help with dishes or cleaning. Her movements efficient and graceful in a way that seemed at odds with her destitute appearance. She seemed fascinated by the simple domesticity of their lives. She would watch, transfixed, as Liam helped Lily with her reading, her expression unreadable. One afternoon, he came home from a fruitless search for work to find Alara on the floor with Lily, patiently showing her how to braid a doll's hair. There was a gentleness in her hands, a softness in her voice as she spoke to his daughter, that made his chest ache. For a brief moment, the house felt less empty, felt almost whole. But the reprieve was short-lived. A few days later, another envelope arrived. It was an eviction notice, cold and final. They had 2 weeks. The world came crashing down again. That night, Liam couldn't hide his despair. He sat at the kitchen table long after Lily was asleep, his head in his hands, the stark reality of their situation a physical weight crushing him. He didn't hear Alara enter the kitchen. She stood there for a long moment before speaking. "Is everything all right?" she asked softly. He couldn't bring himself to lie. He pushed the notice across the table. He watched as her eyes scanned the page, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the edge of the table. A storm of emotions crossed her face. Anger, sorrow, and something else he couldn't name. It looked like guilt. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice thick. "I'm a burden to you." "No," he said immediately, his voice firm. "You are not a burden. This is not your fault." But he knew, and she knew, that the $20 she had given him was a drop in an ocean of debt. The fragile peace they had found was about to be shattered. The next morning, she was gone. On the pillow in her room, she had left the $20 bill he had taken from her, and beside it, a small, smooth stone from his garden. There was no note, no explanation. She had simply vanished, leaving behind an even deeper silence and the lingering scent of rain. He was alone again. Alara Sterling sat in the back of a gleaming, sleek black car as it sped silently through the city streets. The sterile opulence of the leather interior a jarring contrast to the worn, gentle warmth of Liam's home. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red, but she saw none of it. Her mind was filled with the image of Liam's face, the quiet dignity in his haunted eyes as he looked at that eviction notice. She saw Lily's innocent smile and the way she had offered her teddy bear without a moment's hesitation. The past week had been a revelation, a profound and painful education. She had run away from her father's cavernous mansion, from a world of polished marble and unspoken emotional neglect, desperate to find something real. She had wanted to see if the world her father always described, a transactional, cruel place where everyone had a price, was the only reality. She had intentionally made herself a ghost, with only a few dollars and the clothes on her back, to see what would happen. She had expected indifference, cruelty, and rejection. She had found Liam. His selfless act of kindness, offering shelter to a crying stranger when he had nothing himself, had been a seismic shock to her system. It had reawakened a part of her heart she thought had long since turned to stone. It gave her a new, undeniable purpose. The car pulled through a set of ornate iron gates and up a long, winding driveway to a stately home that looked more like a museum than a place where people lived. Her father, Alistair Sterling, was waiting for her in the cavernous entryway. He was an impeccable man in a crisp, tailored suit. His face a commanding mask of discipline and power. He was a titan of industry, a name that echoed in boardrooms and stock markets. But in this moment, he was just a father who had been terrified for his missing daughter. Yet, his relief manifested not as a warm embrace, but as a barrage of questions and clipped commands. "Where have you been? Your security detail was frantic. I had half the police force looking for you, quietly, of course." He looked her up and down, his eyes scanning her simple clothes with disapproval. "We need to get you presentable. There's a gala on Saturday." There was no, "Are you okay?" No, I was worried sick, only logistics and appearances. The familiar chill of his emotional distance settled over her. But this time, it didn't wound her. It solidified her resolve. She now had a benchmark for true wealth, and it had nothing to do with the cold grandeur that surrounded her. It was the warmth of a shared meal of soup and toast, the comfort of a borrowed quilt, the pure gold of a child's trust. In the following days, Ilara began her quiet intervention. She was careful, operating from the shadows, using the immense resources at her disposal with surgical precision. She started with the eviction notice. A quick call to her father's top lawyer, and a wire transfer was made from an anonymous charitable fund. The debt was cleared. Liam would receive a letter stating that a clerical error had been found and his account was now in good standing. She couldn't risk him knowing it was her. His pride was a fragile, dignified thing, and she would not insult it with charity. Next, she arranged for a delivery from an upscale organic grocery service. Several large boxes filled with fresh produce, quality meats, and Lily's favorite snacks were left on his porch with a note that read, "Congratulations! You are the winner of our monthly neighborhood giveaway." It was a clumsy lie, but the best she could come up with. She imagined his confusion, his suspicion, and then the quiet relief as he looked at Lily. She pictured him making a real, nourishing meal, the worry easing from his shoulders for just a few hours. A new winter coat for Lily, a beautiful warm parka the color of a winter sky, was delivered from a high-end department store, attributed to a secret Santa program. Each anonymous gift was a small repayment for the immense kindness he had shown her, a way to protect the goodness he represented in the world. She was his hidden savior, a guardian angel he didn't know he had, and it filled the hollow spaces in her own heart with a profound, aching warmth. She was healing herself by healing him. She knew she couldn't stay away forever. The anonymous gifts were a temporary balm, not a solution. She needed to see him, to talk to him, to understand the man who had so effortlessly saved her from her own cynicism. She found her chance a week later. She knew from his sparse conversation that Lily's school was having a small winter festival. She dressed down in simple, comfortable clothes that wouldn't draw attention, and went to the school. She stood at the edge of the playground, a biting wind whipping at her hair, and watched. She saw Liam pushing Lily on the swings, a genuine smile on his face, the haunted look in his eyes replaced by a soft glow of paternal love. Her heart clenched. He looked up and saw her. For a moment he froze, a look of pure shock on his face. Then, a slow, hesitant smile spread across his lips. He walked over, Lily's small hand tucked in his. "Ilara," he said, his voice filled with a quiet wonder. "I thought I'd never see you again. I had some things to take care of," she said, the understatement of the century. "I wanted to apologize for leaving so suddenly." Lily, never shy, ran up and hugged her legs. "The food fairy came to our house," she announced proudly. "And the coat fairy." Liam's cheeks flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and confusion. "We've had some strange luck recently," he admitted, his eyes searching hers for an answer she wasn't ready to give. She had to see him again. They met for coffee a few days later, in a small, quiet cafe that smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon. The air between them was charged with unspoken questions. They sat in a worn booth by the window, the amber hue of the afternoon light softening the lines of worry on his face. This was it, the confession scene. It was here she would learn the truth of his suffering, and he the truth of hers. After a few moments of gentle, stilted small talk, Liam looked down at his hands, wrapped around the warm ceramic mug. "My wife, Clara," he began, his voice a low murmur. She was the light of our lives. Everything was color and music when she was here. He spoke of her illness, a swift and brutal battle that had drained their finances and, in the end, her life. He spoke not with self-pity, but with a profound, aching love and a quiet, dignified grief. He confessed his deepest fear, that he was failing Lily, that he couldn't give her the life her mother would have wanted for her. Every day, I feel like I'm letting them both down, he said, his voice cracking for the first time. He finally looked up, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, and she saw the full depth of his raw, unbearable pain. He was letting her see him. Alara listened, her gaze unwavering and steady. She didn't offer empty platitudes or cheap reassurances. She simply listened, giving him the sacred space to be vulnerable. When he finished, she reached across the table and placed her hand gently on his. It was a simple gesture, but it was filled with a world of unspoken understanding. Then it was her turn. "I know what it's like to lose a mother," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "Mine passed away when I was a teenager." She told him about her own life, painting a picture not of material hardship, but of profound emotional poverty. She spoke of a father who was a ghost in his own home, a man who showed love through trust funds and expensive gifts but never through his time or his presence. "You can be starving in a palace," she explained, the words feeling fragile and true on her tongue. "My whole life, I've been surrounded by people, but I've never felt more alone. I ran away to see if anything else existed. If people like you were real." A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. He gently wiped it away with his thumb, his touch sending a jolt of warmth through her. In that small, quiet cafe, two lonely souls, from two vastly different worlds, forged a bond over their shared grief. They saw each other. Their tentative connection grew stronger in the weeks that followed. They met in parks, went for walks, and talked for hours, their conversations weaving a tapestry of shared hopes and fears. Alara fell not just for Liam, but for the small, warm world he had built with Lily. She cherished the simple moments. Reading Lily a bedtime story, helping Liam in the garden, sharing a simple meal. For the first time, she felt like she belonged somewhere. But a storm was gathering on the horizon, one she hadn't anticipated. Liam received a certified letter. It was from Beatrice, his late wife's mother. She was petitioning for full custody of Lily, claiming he was an unfit, destitute father incapable of providing a stable home. The news was a devastating blow, a cruel attack on his deepest insecurity. The hearing was scheduled to take place at the community center during a mandatory parent-teacher conference, a calculated move by Beatrice to ensure maximum public humiliation. Alara saw the shattered look in his eyes and knew this was a battle he couldn't fight alone. The time for secrets was over. The stage was set for the salvation scene. The community center buzzed with the low murmur of conversation. A cavernous room filled with parents, teachers, and the bright, crayon-colored artwork of children. Liam stood near the back, looking pale and out of place in his best, yet still slightly worn shirt. He clutched a folder of documents, his knuckles white, his posture a portrait of quiet desperation. Alara stood beside him, a silent, steady presence. Then Beatrice arrived. She was a woman carved from ice, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit that screamed wealth and disdain. She swept into the room like a vulture, her sharp eyes immediately landing on Liam. She didn't wait. She strode directly toward them, her heels clicking sharply on the polished floor, drawing the attention of everyone around them. The climactic confrontation had begun. "Liam," she began, her voice dripping with venom, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm glad you're here. It saves me the trouble of telling everyone individually what a complete and utter failure you are." A collective gasp went through the room. People turned to stare. Liam winced as if he'd been physically struck. "You couldn't save my daughter," Beatrice hissed, her words sharp and cruel. "And now you are dragging my granddaughter down with you into this pathetic, impoverished life. Look at you. You can't even afford a decent suit. How can you possibly provide for a child?" She gestured around at the other, more affluent parents. These people give their children stability, opportunities. You give her leftovers and second-hand clothes. She deserves better. She deserves me. Liam stood frozen, his face ashen, the public humiliation washing over him in waves. He was dignified, but overwhelmed, his quiet strength faltering under the sheer brutality of the attack. He opened his mouth to speak, to defend himself, but no words came. He was shattered. Just as Beatrice was about to deliver another verbal blow, Alara stepped forward, placing a calming hand on Liam's arm. She moved with a commanding grace, her expression calm but powerful. The air in the room shifted. "That's enough," Alara said, her voice quiet but carrying an undeniable authority that cut through the tension. Beatrice scoffed. "And who are you?" "Another one of his charity cases." Alara looked directly at Beatrice, her sea-storm eyes unwavering. "My name is Alara Sterling," she said clearly. A few people in the crowd murmured. The name was familiar. Beatrice's eyes narrowed, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "Sterling? As in, Sterling Enterprises." At that precise moment, as if on cue, the main doors of the community center swung open. A man in a crisp, dark suit, Alistair Sterling's chief of staff, entered, flanked by two other impeccably dressed individuals. He walked directly to Alara. "Miss Sterling," he said, his voice respectful. "The car is ready. Your father has confirmed the wire transfer." He handed her a sleek tablet. The final piece was in place. Alara turned her attention back to the stunned room, her voice ringing with clarity and conviction. "This man, Liam, is the kindest, most honorable person I have ever met. When I had nothing, when I was a stranger at his door in the middle of a storm, he took me in. He gave me shelter and warmth when he barely had enough for himself and his daughter. That is not failure. That is character. That is a wealth you can't possibly comprehend." She then looked at Beatrice, her gaze like ice. "You talk about providing for Lily? Let's talk about providing." She tapped the screen of the tablet. "I have just established a trust fund in Lily's name that will cover every expense for her education, from this day through any university in the world she chooses to attend. Furthermore," she continued, her voice rising, "I am the new head of the Sterling Foundation's philanthropic division. My first act is to offer Liam a position as director of our new community outreach program, a position that comes with a six-figure salary and full benefits." A wave of shock rippled through the crowd. Beatrice's face had gone from smug cruelty to slack-jawed disbelief. She was speechless. Alara delivered the final blow. "You tried to weaponize this man's poverty to hurt him, but you're wrong. His heart is the most valuable asset in this room, and it's something you will never have." Total silence. The power dynamic had not just shifted. It had been completely and utterly reversed. Later that evening, the small house was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. It was the soft hush of shock and disbelief giving way to a new, fragile reality. The cruel words from the community center still echoed faintly, but they were drowned out by the seismic implications of Alara's actions. Liam sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he had agonized over bills, and stared at the official job offer on the tablet Alara had left. It felt unreal, like a dream he would soon wake from. He felt a dizzying mix of profound gratitude and a deep, unsettling sense of inadequacy. He was a simple man. He didn't belong in that world of trusts and foundations. When Alara came to sit opposite him, he finally looked up, his eyes filled with 1,000 questions. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why would you do all of this?" He needed to understand. Alara reached across the table, her hand covering his. Her touch was warm, grounding. "Because you saved me first, Liam," she said, her voice tender and sincere. "I was lost. I grew up believing that the world was cold and transactional, that kindness was a weakness, and that money was the only thing that mattered. I was drowning in loneliness, and I didn't even know it." Her eyes glistened, reflecting the flickering light from the lamp above. "That night you opened your door to me, you didn't see a homeless girl you could ignore. You saw a person in pain and you chose to help. You and Lily, you showed me what a real home feels like. You showed me what real wealth is. It has nothing to do with money. A sob caught in her throat. All of this, she gestured to the tablet. This is just me using my father's tools to protect what is truly valuable, to protect your goodness, to give you the security you've given to so many others without a second thought. He stared at her, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The paid-off bills, the groceries, the winter coat. It was all her. It wasn't luck or a clerical error. It was a secret, steady hand guiding them out of the darkness. A wave of emotion, so powerful it almost buckled him, washed through him. It was gratitude, it was awe, it was the undeniable, cathartic realization that he was being seen for exactly who he was. You didn't see a struggling single dad, she continued, her thumb gently stroking the back of his hand. From the moment I met you, I saw the kindest, strongest, most dignified man I have ever known. I think I've been falling in love with you since you handed me that first cup of tea. The confession hung in the air between them, pure and undeniable. Liam felt the last of his defenses crumble, the walls he had built around his heart after losing Clara turning to dust. He stood up, pulled her gently to her feet, and framed her face with his hands. He looked into her stormy eyes and saw his future. He didn't need to say a word. He leaned in and kissed her, a kiss filled with all the unspoken grief, the quiet desperation, and the profound, blossoming hope of their two fractured souls finally finding their way home. It was a promise. 1 year later, golden afternoon sunlight streamed through the large bay window of a beautiful, welcoming home. It was a stately house, but not a sterile one. It was filled with the warm clutter of a happy family life. Laughter echoed from the lush green garden, a sound that was now the permanent soundtrack of their lives. Liam, no longer looking worn and haunted but confident and content, stood at the window, watching his daughter. Lily, now 7, was chasing bubbles across the lawn, her joyous shrieks filling the air. She was thriving, secure in the unwavering love that surrounded her. Sitting in a comfortable lawn chair, holding the bubble wand, was Alistair Sterling. The once commanding CEO looked softer now, the crisp edges of his corporate persona blurred by the undeniable joy of being a grandfather. Inspired by the profound change in his daughter, he had started the slow, difficult work of learning to connect, replacing board meetings with tea parties and stock reports with bedtime stories. He was healing. Alara came up behind Liam and wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head on his shoulder. She wore a simple summer dress and a look of serene happiness. She had found her purpose not just in running the foundation, which had already changed countless lives, but in building this life with him. He's getting good at that, she chuckled, watching her father trip over a garden gnome in his pursuit of Lily. He's learning, Liam said, turning to kiss her. We all are. Their life wasn't a fairy tale, but a testament to the quiet power of decency. Liam excelled at his work, his innate empathy making him a brilliant and compassionate director. He had found a way to use his own experiences with hardship to help others, turning his past pain into a source of strength and purpose. Together, he and Alara had created a home built not on wealth, but on a foundation of mutual respect, shared vulnerability, and a love that had been forged in the crucible of hardship. They had saved each other. He pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair, overwhelmed by a sense of profound, quiet gratitude. They were home. This story is a testament to the idea that true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in the currency of kindness. It is a fable of how one small, selfless act can create ripples that save not just one life, but many, forging a connection that transcends class and circumstance. Liam's decision to open his door to a stranger was an act of faith in a world that had given him every reason to lose it, and in return, the universe opened its doors to him. If this story touched your heart, and you believe in the power of compassion to heal the deepest wounds, please let us know. These tales are for those who see the light in others, even when the world is dark, and who understand that the greatest strength is a gentle and open heart. We invite you to like, share, and subscribe to Soulful Love Tales for more soul-stirring stories of love, redemption, and the inspiring power of the human spirit. Your support helps us continue to create heartwarming narratives that remind us of the goodness in the world. We'll see you in the next one.